We're all in the box, intellectually, creatively, and emotionally. Some of us are quite content that way, thank you very much, and never want to leave the box, while others try to venture outside of it. Now, inside the box, life is safe. There's not much risk. There's not much gain, which is its chief selling point, right? You're in your comfort zone. Inside the box, original thinking is discouraged. We become slaves to habitual thought, which, according to the creativity specialist Arthur Kessler, reduces each of us to, quote, the status of a conditioned automaton. Now, you may try to climb out of the box, but just know there are forces that want to keep you inside that box. These obstacles to creativity come from the outside, rules and structures and cultural blocks, and from the inside, fear, insecurities, and emotional blocks. Cultural blocks occur when people are constrained by traditions and beliefs. So, peer pressure, groupthink, social conditioning, norms and conventions, rules and regulations, right? Which we must conform to. So cultural blocks begin early, like when we're entering the school system, that early. And, children are taught that there's one right answer and one right way to do things correctly, which of course is the teacher's way, and the teacher's always right, and students are rewarded for conforming, for doing what's expected of them. The school system, which offers a lot of great things, of course, but it's where we're sent to become socialized and categorized and civilized. And it creates a dilemma because, at least for creative people, because creative people, and especially artists, must, constantly question norms and truths and appearances and learn to think independently, but that can come at some cost. I mean, if you challenge society's value system, cultural enforcers are going to pay you a visit. And that's what happened in the 1930s and the 1940s when jazz musicians began experimenting with improvisational jazz. This great art form, it's no stretch to say, was conceived by pot-smoking musicians, jazz musicians, who felt confined by the structural limitations of the box, right? In this case, represented by a sheet of music, off of which you must not stray. Now, Harry J. Anslinger, the notorious commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics back in the day, well, he had a vendetta against these pot-smoking jazz musicians, and he was obsessed with locking them up in jail. Why? Well, partly because they were black, perhaps, and partly because they were pot smokers, perhaps. But there's another issue, which is these musicians having the audacity to flout the principles of musical structure, right? So, hey, some people have a tough time with change, and Anslinger, you see, was this kind of old school jazz purist, a traditionalist. So he was essentially accusing these black pot smoking, rule breaking jazz musicians of perverting the purity of his beloved jazz. Believed it was evidence of deviant behavior. Okay? So that's the cultural message that's being sent. Stick to the notes on the page. Conform. And stay inside your box. Now, this isn't to deny the importance of structure, a piece of music, a novel, a screenplay, a sculpture, even a conversation among friends, right? They all have structures, and to some degree, we need structure. But structures are also, by their very nature, rigid and linear and rational. And as we'll see, one of the great cognitive advantages is that cannabis temporarily destroys structures and systems. And when those are removed, creators feel liberated and less inhibited, and they're able to engage in creative thinking that's free-flowing and fearless.